Today, I'm here with Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears. First, I want to say thank you so much for dedicating your time and knowledge to this space to kind of give an overview of what you do and as it relates to the criminal justice system. As I mentioned to you, you are the first person that we are interviewing for Lady Justice and I, which is a campaign that I created to help elevate the voices of those directly impacted by the criminal justice system. And so within this campaign series, I will be interviewing people like yourself and other individuals who have any type of direct correlation, impact, or influence within the legal space to be able to get a deeper knowledge of what it looks like to be entrenched in the criminal justice system, but also what it means to have gone through the system as well. So interviewing youth and other individuals who have been directly impacted. So again, thank you so much for being here. I did do very, very short, brief introduction, but I'm going to ask you questions to guide you along. But I just want to start, who are you, and give a little bit of background about what it is that you do.
Yeah, so my name is Ryan Mears. I'm the Marion County Prosecutor.
Yes.
I've been the prosecutor since 2019, but I worked in the prosecutor's office really since 2006. It was my first job out of law school. And the reason I became a prosecutor is I wanted to help people, and I wanted to make a difference in my community. I grew up on the west side of Indianapolis, attended Cardinal River High School, and so I really have a real passion for the city. I love the city of Indianapolis, and you're always looking for ways that you can make contributions. And I always think about my parents. My mom was a school teacher who loved her job, loved going to work every day, and my dad worked in insurance, and he just had a job. And so kind of seeing those two different viewpoints really made me want to consider a life in public service, and I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to work in the prosecutor's office and serve as the Marion County Prosecutor.
Yes, that's awesome. Well, as we're talking about prosecution and just your background, can you explain to people who might not know, what is a prosecutor?
Okay, well, so the very general role of a prosecutor is it's our job to enforce the criminal code in Marion County. And so we're a constitutionally created office here in the state of Indiana, and we get our authority from the Indiana Constitution, and it's our job to decide what types of cases should or should not be pursued if it takes place in Marion County. That's kind of the very general aspect of what we're trying to do.
Okay.
I think one of the things that we've tried to do as an agency, especially since I've been prosecutor, is really try to look beyond that and say, how can we have the biggest impact on the community, and how can we help as many people as possible? Because I kind of came up in the criminal justice system, I've had literally every job that you can imagine in the criminal justice system, both as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. It gives you a really unique perspective where you can see that, hey, maybe there's some areas where we can improve, or these outcomes ultimately don't benefit the community or a particular individual. How can we make that more fair, and how can we help people out, whether they are a victim, whether they're a witness or a defendant on a case? And that's really kind of the approach that we've tried to take, and so we've kind of expanded the scope of what we do in the office, just understanding that if the only thing that we do is convict people, we're probably not going to serve the interest of every single person who's a defendant. We're certainly not going to serve the interests of the community as a whole.
Right. Thank you for that. And you did jump the gun, because I was going to ask you, what does your office do and what your focus is? But to go a little bit back a little bit, what role, you did mention this, but if you can elaborate a little bit, what role does prosecution specifically play in the criminal justice system at large?
Well, I think one of the biggest things for us is we need to be a neutral and independent agency. We need to be independent of the police department, we need to be independent of the courts, and we need to be that independent group that is in a position that, hey, if we think the police maybe made a mistake, we're in a position to say that. And we also need to make sure that we have a very close relationship with the community. You know, it's important for me to always remember and emphasize we serve the community doesn't serve us. And so we have to have that mentality when we go to work every single day in terms of what are we doing to make this community a better place? What are we doing to help out today? The easy thing is to point out, hey, we convicted a person of murder. The last week we convicted someone, 3 people in a quadruple murder. The community sees that and they understand the role of the prosecutor's office. But what's also important in what we do, though, is what can we do to make sure that we don't see that person, someone else, who's on a low-level case, what can we do to make sure we don't see that person come back in the criminal justice system? How can we help change behavior? And that's really the balanced approach that we try to take when we're talking about issues in the criminal justice system.
That's good. Thank you for that background. And so, of course, prosecution, there's different, levels to it. And I want to know, what do you specifically do within your office, and how does that differ from other prosecutors?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we try to do is we try to make sure that we completely focus our energy and effort on violent crime. That's where our priority is. We've never had more success in the courtroom in terms of being able to hold people who commit homicides accountable. We had our best year last year. We've gotten off to a fantastic start this year. But I think where we're a little bit different is we also look and we understand that there are very few people who are going to the Department of Correction for the rest of their life.
Right.
Those people are coming back into our community. The question becomes, what are we going to do to help those individuals get acclimated, set them up in a position to be successful so we don't see them in the criminal justice system again? There are so many collateral consequences to felony convictions, and we work really hard to try to assist people with those issues. So hopefully we're in a position where we can help people get into housing, because too many people are discriminated against. That felony convictions keeps them from someone running to them. That felony keeps them from working.
Right.
That felony keeps them from driving.
Exactly.
And so what we try to do is really work with those individuals. Hey, how can we help set you up to be successful so we don't see you come back into the criminal justice system? And that's an approach that not necessarily a lot of people outside of Marion County take. But I think it's something that's necessary, because it doesn't do us any good to basically say that person right there, they're never going to find a place to live and they're never going to find a place to work,
Right.
because people won't rent to felons and people won't hire felons. How does that make our community better?
Exactly.
And if that individual doesn't have a place to live, and if he's not working, we're going to see him in the criminal justice system again. And that's why it's on us in the criminal justice system and the community as a whole to create a framework and provide opportunities that individual has an opportunity to find that housing, to get that job, because that's what people need to be on that long-term path to success.
Yes, thank you for that. And that's how I feel your office and what your focus is specifically within your role kind of aligns greatly with what I'm doing with Lady Justice and I, helping youth, specifically helping Black youth in this space to not go back into the system. So I'm working on ways to help, give them what they need to equip them to live a successful life, to kind of see that hope in what you can become, within the world. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So again, I appreciate all of the work that you do. It's a lot of hard work, and I know it's not just you in your office, it takes a whole team. So if you could break down a little bit, what does it take to run your office? Who is in there? If you have like a breakdown of some of the demographics, some of the roles within your office.
So we have 400 people who work in the prosecutor's office. We have 400 people, about 170 to 180 of those individuals are deputy prosecutors. In addition to kind of our criminal responsibilities, we're also involved in child support, and just I want everybody to understand our role in child support. It's very limited, but we're effectively the collection agency for child support. We're not the judge who decides how much you have to pay. We don't do visitation, all those other things that kind of accompany child support. The only role that we have is the judge says this is the amount that you have to pay, and then the prosecutor's office helps enforce that. That's it. But that's a very labor-intensive process, because we collect a little over $100 million a year. And on the criminal side, we're looking at somewhere between 35,000 criminal cases a year. So it's a pretty significant workload. And so what we try to do is we try to make sure that when we have contact with people in the criminal justice system, in particular on lower level offenses, we are looking for what can we do to make sure that we can help change behavior so we don't see this person again.
Right.
What are we trying to achieve with this criminal case? How is this criminal case going to make the person on the other side of the table better? And how's this going to ultimately benefit the community? And so that's really the approach that we try to take on those issues. And then on violent crime, we understand our obligation is not only to an individual victim, but to the community as a whole. We don't want people to be put in danger. And so we focused a ton of resources on that. And so we probably have, of the 170 deputy prosecutors we have in the office, probably close to 60 and 70 of them are dedicated solely to violent crime, to make sure that's where our priority is. The other individuals are handling those lower level cases and making sure that we're coming up with programming that makes sense for the community, working with young people to try to put them in a better position. So hopefully they'll be successful moving forward.
Well, I hope so too. It looks like you all have started a good track record for making, of course, a positive impact within our communities and within these spaces. And you did kind of touch on this next question actually quite a bit. But, a career in law is not an easy one to take. It's not an easy path, especially for wanting to make a positive difference within that space, given the history and, just the course of how things have been shaped. But if you want to go into a little bit more detail, why did you pursue a career in prosecution and law at large? What impact did you, as Ryan Mears, want to make in this field?
Yeah, so I feel very fortunate to have this opportunity, and it really did start from that desire of you want to help people,
Right.
and you want to make a difference in your community. And there's always a lot of noise, and there's always a lot of things out there. But if you just focus on the work, you're going to be fine. Certainly we have challenged the status quo on some different issues, and when you do that, you're going to attract attention. You're going to get a little bit of heat
Yes.
when you do those things. But if you're just here to be a placeholder, you shouldn't have the job.
Mm-hmm.
And I really am a firm believer, if you're fortunate enough to get one of these positions or one of these opportunities, you have to make the most of it. And making the most of it means you have to stand up for what you believe in. And sometimes, I think most people would agree, our criminal justice system is not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It needs changes. And we're going to be at the forefront of making sure that those changes occur. That's not always the most popular thing because people are used to the status quo. People are threatened anytime you decide to challenge the status quo.
Right.
But ultimately, that's the only way we're going to see progress. And that's something that I'm going to fight for every day.
That's good. Thank you. And so just going a little bit more into detail, are there a set list of specific key issues that you're working on? I know you mentioned violent crime a lot, but what are, maybe some of the other key issues that your office specifically is working on?
So the biggest challenge that I see in our community right now is housing.
Okay.
If you have individuals who don't have housing, it's really tough to work on your mental health issues. It's really tough to work on your addiction issues. It's really tough to maintain a job if you don't know where you're going to stay every
Right.
night. And so that's traditionally kind of outside the scope of the prosecutor's office, but we've partnered up with Horizon House and a lot of other agencies to see what we can do to assist getting people into housing. The one thing that I have found, if you want to keep people out of the criminal justice system, give them a place to live and give them a job, and then I don't see them again in the criminal justice system. So we spend a ton of energy and effort trying to help get people into housing, to make sure people get employed, because that's one of the best ways to make sure that we can, we don't have to encounter people.
Right.
I think the other thing that I'm really working on right now is, what's super important to me, is I have everything in my life because of education. I was very fortunate to be provided with educational opportunities. My mom was a school teacher. She made sure I went to school. She made sure I studied. And I'm grateful for that. But I also understand not everybody had the same educational opportunities that I had. And so I want to be in a position to, how can I help bring those educational opportunities to people? So one of the things that I'm most excited that we're working on right now is with Ivy Tech. We've started this program where individuals who are involved with the criminal justice system have that opportunity to get a GED, have that opportunity to get vocational training, have that opportunity to get college credits through the criminal justice system. And hopefully that's a life-changing opportunity for people, where we're providing those tools and those resources so individuals can develop the skills that they need to get that job, to find that employment that's going to pay for that house, that's going to pay for that car, so we don't see them again. And so, education a lot of times is a barrier for people, whether it's the cost or the opportunity cost of, hey, I need to work to support my family and my kids, so I can't go to school. And we're trying to help eliminate and reduce those barriers, because I want a well-educated workforce. I want the people in this city, in this community, to have the benefits and the opportunities that an education provides. And so if I have that opportunity to interact with someone through the criminal justice system, how can I maximize that interaction so we provide that person with the best opportunity possible? And some of that is giving people educational opportunities through this partnership with Ivy Tech, which is what I'm super excited about.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like, of course, given the stigma surrounding prosecution, it's not just about tackling issues that relate specifically to the law, or tackling crimes, or just that. It seems like you're really, really entrenched into making a difference in our community and being involved to making positive impacts in people's lives. And so I'm sure you know about the negative things that have come with attaching to prosecution. But can you tell me, what is the difference that your office is doing? How is it different from the traditional historical approach to prosecution?
Well, the biggest thing is we can't get defensive about those criticisms.
Yeah.
When people say, hey, the criminal justice system messed this up, yeah, you're right. The criminal justice system messed up a lot of things. Hey, you thought, being the prosecutor's office, you thought you were helping, but you made the situation 20 times worse. We saw it with the war on drugs. The idea was, hey, let's arrest everybody and lock everybody up for drugs, and that'll make our community safer. What we actually saw is it disproportionately impacted people of color,
Right.
and we took a ton of fathers out of their community where they were not in a position to raise their children because they were incarcerated for very small amounts of drugs, and ultimately had a tremendously negative impact on our community. And there's a lot of people who have written about this who are far more articulate about it than I am right now. But that's one of those things where we, as a criminal justice system, failed the community. Our response to a problem was to put everybody in jail, and the ultimate benefit in the community was not the result that we were looking for. And so when we make mistakes like that, we have to acknowledge it. We have to say we took the wrong approach. I think the second part of that too is we also have to acknowledge the criminal justice system hasn't always gotten it right. There have been times when jury verdicts or convictions have not been based just on applying the law to the facts, but it's been based on bias or prejudice. Those things have occurred. Right. And so we not only have an obligation to look forward to say, hey, what can we change things? We have an obligation to look back. And we need to make sure that we right those wrongs. We started the first conviction integrity review unit in the entire state of Indiana because we understand that those things did take place. Those things are out there, and it's really important for us to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to try to deal with those historical issues that exist in the criminal justice system. We have seen it in sentencing, where there are disparities in sentencing, sometimes based on race. And we have to be willing to acknowledge that, but more importantly, we not only have to acknowledge it, but what proactive steps can we do to remedy those past wrongs and the harm that has created in the community. The community didn't wake up one day and say, hey, we don't trust the prosecutor's office, we don't trust the police, we don't trust the criminal justice system. That was well earned over the course of time, and we have to acknowledge that harm in order for us to move forward in a way where all of us can work together.
So really big on accountability, right, and moving forward.
And honesty.
Yes,
we have to be honest about it.
Exactly. And I think that's a really, really great approach to have for someone in this position. So thank you for that. But you, again, I'm going back, we're going to edit the video a little bit too, but you talked a lot about the programs that you offered, and you did mention, I believe, one or two of those already. Are there any other programs that you offer for individuals who have been impacted by the system?
Yeah, so we have our Boys and Girls program, which I think has been pretty successful as it relates to young people. One of the biggest things that I saw is we saw so many young people that become involved with the criminal justice system. And then they'd reoffend. And so that told me we're not doing our job as adults. And so what we did is, instead of doing that traditional prosecution, hey, we're going to pay to send kids to the Boys and Girls Club. But it's not only just a membership of the Boys and Girls Club, we also pair people up with a social worker where we can really try to understand, hey, what's going on, what's driving this criminal behavior. And what we found a lot of times is kids are just placed in really difficult situations. There's a lot of addiction issues in the home. There's mental health challenges in the home. There's financial issues in the home. There's food insecurity, or maybe they don't have a consistent place to stay. A lot of times you see all these environmental factors that these kids have no control over, which is driving them to be involved in some things that they probably wouldn't otherwise be doing. And so having a better understanding of where people are coming from is really, really important. Another thing that we work really hard on is, we're really trying to address the trauma that exists in our community. There are too many people who have been a victim or a witness to violence, yet we don't treat that violence, we don't treat that trauma. And then as a consequence, people self-medicate or people deal with it in their own ways that oftentimes aren't productive. And so one of the things that we're trying to work on now, a new program that we just started, is let's see what we can do to address that underlying trauma. So if you are someone who's a victim or a witness to a violent crime and maybe get arrested on a drug charge, your issue might not be addiction. You might be self-medicating because you don't know how to deal with the trauma that you just witnessed. How can we help you deal with that trauma? Exactly. And let's use that intervention point of a criminal case to deal with the underlying trauma. And so we just hired some clinicians and some people to work with us to offer meaningful services to people to hopefully deal with those underlying issues of the trauma that we see far too often in our community.
Yes, and that's good. That's another one of the things that Lady Justice and I will go into detail about as well. Pretty much everything that you just mentioned within that last last question that I asked. And so not to kind of change gears, but to go a little bit more into details about the system and those impacted. In terms of demographic, I believe you do have the numbers within your office, but how many people are there in prisons here in the state of Indiana?
In the state of Indiana,
Yes.
I'm not sure what the total number is, but
Okay.
it's an extraordinary number. I think people would be surprised at the number of people that are in the Department of Correction. I know in the Marion County Jail, there's right around 2,600 people
Okay.
at any given time, who are, most of those individuals are awaiting trial. But the Department of Corrections is usually pretty full with individuals.
Okay, thank you for that. And then in terms of maybe even more demographics, how many would you say youth are in prisons or, going through the juvenile system?
So I can't give you a number on the total that are in the juvenile system. I think right now, last count, there were 40 youth from Marion County who were in the juvenile Department of Correction. And I think 38 of them were male and 2 were female. So you definitely see a disparity between male and female in terms of who goes to the juvenile Department of Correction. You'd like to think that there are alternatives and opportunities short of the Department of Correction for young people. I think one of the challenges that I have seen in this job is we are seeing younger and younger kids being charged with more serious crimes. And that's been a real challenge for the juvenile justice system. That's been a real challenge for the prosecutor's office and our community as a whole as to how can we best address this issue of really young people doing really terrible things. And so that's one of the issues that I think all of us are kind of struggling with right now. As we move forward into 2023.
And so within your role, I know you've seen like a scope of different, crimes, level of offenses, but also different people committing these crimes. But I want to go into detail because we all, know that there is a disparity of, black and brown people being incarcerated at higher levels. But from your perspective and from your experience, what are some of the disparities that you have seen within the system as it relates to black and brown and other marginalized groups of individuals?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you see it, and sometimes the easiest thing to study are the lower level offenses. Everybody commits traffic violations, but who ultimately gets pulled over and who ends up in traffic court. I think marijuana is a perfect example. I think the drug use studies have very clearly demonstrated that both white people and African American people use marijuana on a pretty consistent basis, or there's a significant percentage of both races that use marijuana on a consistent basis. Yet when you look who ultimately ends up in the criminal justice system, once again you see this huge disparity. And so, I mean, if we know these disparities exist, what are we going to do about them? And I think a lot of that comes down to enforcement, both on the law enforcement side and the prosecutor side. We made the decision as it relates to simple possession of marijuana, we're not going to prosecute that because we did see this incredible racial disparity, which, right now there's someone at Butler probably smoking weed. But, that person, if they get caught with marijuana, is going to be administratively punished. Hey, you're going to lose a privilege in the dorm room. Whereas if you're out here at 40th and Keystone using marijuana and you get pulled over by the police and you have to be African American, then we're going to put that in the criminal justice system. You have 2 kids doing the same behavior, yet they have very different outcomes based on where they were physically located. We have to acknowledge that those disparities exist, that happens, and we have to make sure that we're taking proactive steps not to perpetuate those types of issues. Traffic enforcement, to me, is a perfect example. Everybody wants traffic enforcement. We don't want people driving crazy on our roads. But I think we could all agree, whether you're white or African American, there's more than a fair share of drivers out there of every race that don't drive safely, that endanger other people. And how do we make sure that enforcement accurately reflects what everybody's doing, as opposed to just people who are in certain areas and certain neighborhoods.
And so, yes, you did tackle all of these issues that are coming to me as it relates to marginalized individuals. As you mentioned already, the lack of food resources, lack of job, lack of I think basic necessities that are needed. Of course, we see that lack more and more within marginalized communities. And so I'm glad that you were able to tie those things together and make those connections on why there is such a stark, disparity between certain individuals and crimes. And I know that you are actively involved in the community and have worked, directly with people who have been impacted, but also others who are working to make a difference, not just within the legal space, but then, within the community space as well. So with that in mind, what is some of the work that you have seen being done in our communities to help kind of curb or alleviate these issues?
Well, I think the biggest thing is the community has really good answers for you. I think for me, like child support was one of the most, we did something really simple, and it was in response to conversations we were having with people in the community. We started our Good Faith initiative because I talked to some individuals who were coming out of the prison system, and they're like, you want me to work, you want me to get a job, but my license is suspended because I haven't been able to pay child support because I've been in the DOC. How am I supposed to get to work? Like, that's a really fair, good point. You're right. And so we started our Good Faith initiative to help individuals like that get their driver's license reinstated so they could get to and from work, so they could get their license, so they could get that job, so they could start paying on child support. And it's been a really successful program. And that was a community-driven conversation. What I just mentioned about trauma and that trauma resources, my friends in the faith-based community have been telling me for a long time, we don't have anything that is addressing the trauma that so many young people in our community are experiencing. Right. How, violence begets more violence. That's occurring. What can you do to interrupt that violence? And part of it is giving people the resources to deal with the trauma that they've experienced. And so, I think I'm just a big believer in the people in the community who are active, who care, have good ideas because they're talking to the people who are hurting. They're talking to the people who are suffering. They're talking to the people who need resources. Listen to them. And if you do that, then you can come up with policies and programming that hopefully addresses some of the challenges that people are facing in our community. I'd love to sit here and tell you I got all these great ideas. They're not my ideas. It's coming from the community. It's the people in the community who are saying, this is what we need. Right. And what we try to do is respond to as best we can to some of the challenges that people in our community are facing.
Yes, thank you for that. And so with all of this in mind, with all of the impact that your office is making, community members are making, what do you hope the future of prosecution, and even in general, what do you hope the future of the criminal justice system will look like?
I just want people to think the criminal justice system is fair. I meet too many people who feel like, hey, I got a bad rap. My friend, my neighbor, my cousin, my uncle, my brother, they were treated unfairly by the criminal justice system, and I want people to see the system as fair. That's the objective. That's where we all need to be working towards, is how can we make the criminal justice system more fair to everyone in our community as a whole. And I think if we do that, that's going to help restore trust and confidence, which is what we need. Because I can't give out money to people. I can't do a lot of different things. The only thing I have is, does the public trust what we're doing or not? A judge, their power comes from the people. Do people trust that this person is going to be fair? And if you lose that trust, if you don't have that trust, that's when we find ourselves in trouble. And as I previously mentioned, the criminal justice system, law enforcement, prosecutors, we've done a lot to undermine that trust with the community. And now it's on us to try to help build and restore that trust. So hopefully when people think of the criminal justice system, they think it's fair, because I meet far too many people in our community who think I'm not going to be treated fairly because of the way I look, because of where I'm from, because I can't afford an attorney. And that to me is one of the great injustices that exist here today.
Yes, and that is really interesting that you say that. And I think we are coming to a close, but overall, what can really make a difference, as you mentioned, is, really directly kind of being in connection with those who have had impact, who are able to tell their stories, who are able to put it out there, what exactly, they went through, what exactly they feel, to really understanding who they are and why these things keep happening, which is the reason why this campaign was started, to really get to the heart and soul of the individual, to understand what it is within them that is, making these things happen, but, really understanding this whole process at large. How did you get in this cycle? How can we make sure that you don't continue, in this same cycle? So I'm glad that the work your office is doing is really trying to understand and help the individual and help, their stories get a more positive track so that they can live a better life. And so to kind of wrap up, I do have, 1 to 2 follow-up ending questions. But just in general, how can people stay connected with your office and informed on the work and programs that you do?
Yes, so some of the best ways, we try to put a lot on social media, and so we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook,
Okay, nice.
we're on Twitter to kind of keep people updated on what the prosecutor's office is doing. I also make it a point to make sure that I go to community meetings every month to make sure that I'm kind of updating people on what we're doing. One of the things that I didn't talk about that I'm really excited about is, we're doing a really big second chance fair, which is when we offer people the opportunity to get expungements and get their driver's license reinstated. We're going to do it in June, and I'm blowing it out. We rented out Lucas Oil Stadium.
Wow.
I'm going to fill that place
Wow.
to try to help people and make a difference in our community. And so those are the types of things that we want to do to try to directly engage with people, and hopefully change people's perception one person at a time that we're here to help, we're not here to hurt.
That's good, and you are doing a good job of being able to put that information out there. That's how I've been able to stay connected through social media pages and all of these different engagements. But final question for you. How can there be more awareness for prosecution, career paths with prosecution, but also those maybe interested in making a difference within this area of law?
Well, I think the biggest thing is we have to do a better job of saying that we want all types of people with all different types of experiences. You might see the world differently than me, but your viewpoint is valuable to not only the prosecutor's office, but the community as a whole, because of what you have gone through as a person and how that impacts the way you perceive events. Is really, really important in order to make sure that our criminal justice system is fair, because we can only make policies and we can only make decisions on cases is if we have a better understanding of what other people are going through and how other people might view those experiences. They view things through their own lens. One thing that I've learned is if you go into a room and everybody looks like you, acts like you, talks like you, and thinks like you, you've lost.
Right.
You need to have different viewpoints and perspectives, and so we need to continue to let the community know we need everybody in this room to help us make those decisions, because we all have experiences that kind of help how we view things, and so knowing that that's out there, we have to encourage everybody to get involved in the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system is just a bunch of people, and it's important that we have diverse perspectives and people with unique experiences who love the community, who want to make a difference, and provide that opportunity for everybody to kind of share where they're coming from as it relates to these different types of cases. That's when we're going to come up with the best resolutions, that's when we're going to come up with the best solutions, and that's when people are going to say the system's more fair.
Well, that was a good ending to this interview and dialogue with you. I thank you again so much for coming